Imagine, just for a second,
Right.
right? Standing on a super busy subway platform,
Okay. Yeah.
like right during the absolute peak of rush hour.
Oh, man, that sounds stressful already.
It really is. You've got these high-speed trains just roaring past you, one after the other. It's this total blur of metal and, harsh lights and just deafening noise.
Right. Yeah.
You feel the wind whipping your face and the kinetic energy. The sheer momentum of it all is literally, physically pushing you backward.
Definitely.
And it's an exhilarating feeling,
Yeah.
but it's fundamentally overwhelming. I mean, your brain is entirely focused on the velocity.
Erica's has to be. Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about speed.
Yeah.
It's about the sheer force of moving from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible.
And in that kind of hyperkinetic environment, your auditory processing is basically in survival mode.
Right.
You aren't processing the micro details of the train cars or like the complex harmonic friction of the steel wheels grinding against the tracks.
Yeah, you definitely aren't paying attention to that.
No, of course not. You certainly aren't studying the fleeting expressions on the faces of the passengers blurred in the windows. Your nervous system is just managing the macro event.
The big picture.
Exactly. You are experiencing pure, unadulterated velocity, which just forces the brain into a state of constant anticipation.
Okay, so now imagine someone pulls a massive industrial lever, right?
Yep. Okay.
And the entire physical world around you shifts into this dramatic, syrupy slow motion.
Oh, wow. Like a movie.
Yeah, just a drastic reduction in speed. And that deafening, high-pitched roar of the train suddenly stretches out.
Yeah.
It turns into this incredibly deep, rumbling, tectonic hum that you can actually vibrate in your chest.
That is a wild image.
Right. The chaotic blur vanishes. Suddenly, you actually have the visual and auditory bandwidth to perceive the individual rigots on metal panels.
Wow, yeah.
You can track the slow, graceful arc of like a single spark flying off the rails. The speed is completely gone. But the power, the sheer physical mass and presence of the train is magnified in a way you couldn't even perceive when it was moving at full speed.
Because it was moving too fast.
Exactly. The object itself hasn't changed its fundamental components at all, but your relationship to it, your capacity to absorb it, has completely transformed.
And that conceptual shift trading a high-speed blur for a magnified, deliberate reality, that is the perfect entry point for what we are dissecting today.
Which I am so excited to get into.
Yeah, me too. We are taking that exact physical and psychological transition and applying it to the consumption and really the architecture of sound.
Right.
Specifically, we are looking at the production philosophy that emerged from Houston in the 1990s through DJ Screw.
A total legend.
Absolutely. A visionary who realized that tempo is not just a measurement of time, it's actually a mechanism for altering the literal gravity of a piece of music.
So we are diving deep into some fascinating production notes today. It's an excerpt from a document titled soundproduction.docs.
Very technical name.
Yeah, but the contents are wild. It's a collection of insights specifically focused on what happens when you aggressively manipulate the speed of a track.
Right.
And the overarching mission here really is to fundamentally rethink our relationship with tempo.
Because we live in an era where we consume media at like 1.5 speed.
Oh, constantly. Everything is sped up.
Algorithms optimize for the quickest possible dopamine hit, And music is often engineered to rush you to the chorus.
Right. Get to the hook as fast as possible. But our notes for today open with a very distinct directive. I'll just quote it directly to set the mood.
Go for it.
It says, "Welcome back to the rotation report. Let's get into the pocket real slow."
Real slow. I love that.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because getting into the pocket is a phrase musicians use all the time, right?
Yeah, it describes that sweet spot where a groove locks in perfectly, where the rhythm just feels effortless.
Right. But adding real slow to that directive changes the physics of the pocket entirely, doesn't it?
It completely rewrites the rules. And it's crucial to differentiate what we are talking about here from modern digital time stretching.
Right, this is a huge distinction.
Exactly, because if you open Spotify or like a modern DJ software right now and you slow a track down, the algorithm mathematically slices the audio into millions of micrograins.
To maintain the original pitch, right?
Yes, the singer still sounds like themselves, they're just singing slower.
Like a YouTube video at half speed.
Exactly. But that is not what we are analyzing today.
We are talking about the analog approach.
Precisely the analog approach. When you are working with a physical turntable like the iconic Technics 1200, and you pull the pitch fader down to slow the tempo, you are physically slowing the rotation of the vinyl record.
Right, the actual physical object is spinning slower.
Yeah. And by stretching the waveform out over a longer period of time, the pitch must inherently drop.
It's physically tied together.
Exactly. The frequencies are pulled downward. And when you pull frequencies down into the lower registers, you are fundamentally altering the acoustic mass of the audio.
So it's not just a matter of the song taking longer to finish. The source document emphasizes this heavily. The music isn't just slower. It becomes vastly heavier and much more deliberate.
And heavier is not a metaphor here. It is a literal description of acoustic physics.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, think about bass frequencies. Those long waveforms that sit at the bottom of the audible spectrum inherently carry more acoustic energy.
Okay.
They require more physical force to generate, and they literally move more cubic feet of air in a room or against your eardrums compared to high frequency.
Oh, wow. So they are physically pushing more air at you.
Exactly. So when you take a track that was recorded at, say, 100 beats per minute and you drag it down to 65 beats per minute.
Which is a massive drop.
Huge drop. Every single element gets dragged down. The pick drum, the bass line, the vocals, the hi-hats, they all get pulled into that high-energy, low-frequency mud.
Right.
The track gains literal acoustic mass. It moves more air. It hits your body differently.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Think of it like zooming in on a high-resolution photograph.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like instead of the image getting blurry when you zoom in, you suddenly see all these hidden textures and details that you completely missed at a normal distance.
Right.
The sound is stretched, but in a way that reveals more rather than taking anything away.
And the deliberate aspect of it completely changes the anticipation.
How do you mean?
Well, when a beat in a fast pop song takes half a second to land, it's just a passing tick on a metronome. It's utilitarian.
It's just keeping time.
Right. But when you slow the tempo down so drastically, and that beat takes a full second or more to finally arrive, its landing feels incredibly premeditated.
Like it really means it.
Yeah, it feels like a massive, unavoidable event. You're forcing the listener's brain to wait. You are expanding the gap between transients.
Okay, for someone listening who might not be an audio engineer, what exactly is a transient?
Good question. A transient is the initial high-energy spike of a sound, like the sharp crack of a snare drum, for example.
Got it.
In high-tempo music, those transients fire so rapidly that they create a continuous wall of forward momentum. By widening the gap between them, you expose the sonic tissue connecting those transients.
You expose the decay.
Exactly. You expose the decay.
That brings up a really fascinating point from the production breakdown regarding the specific anatomy of these stretched sounds.
Right, the mechanics of it.
Yeah. When we look at how the percussion behaves in this slowed-down environment, the text makes this amazing observation. It says the drums stop knocking and begin to echo.
And to understand why that happens, we have to look at what's called the ADSR envelope of a sound.
Which stands for?
Attack, decay, sustain, and release.
Okay.
A knock is almost entirely attack. It's a fast, sharp transient with virtually no release tail. Think of tapping a wooden pencil sharply against a desk.
Just a quick click.
Right. In fast club music, producers explicitly engineer their drums to have very short decay tails.
Why is that?
Because if a kick drum rings out for too long at 120 beats per minute, it will bleed right into the next kick drum.
Oh, so they just mush together?
Exactly. It causes low-frequency phase cancellation and turns the whole mix into this muddy, undefined rumble. The producer is literally forced to truncate the sound.
They literally have to chop the tail off the sound to make room for the next one.
Yes. The environment demands brevity, but when you apply the DJ screw methodology and drop the tempo down to 60 BPM, you suddenly have vast tracts of empty auditory real estate between those beats.
So much more room.
Exactly. The producer, or in this case, the DJ manipulating the record, doesn't have to chop the tail off.
Right.
For the first time, the listener is permitted to hear the full life cycle of the drum hit. You hear the sharp attack, but then you hear the deep, resonant decay as the sound wave slowly dissipates.
The drum hit becomes an echo.
It revealed the acoustic architecture of the room it was recorded in, or the reverb algorithm that was applied to it.
So by simply turning down the speed, you are effectively building an acoustic cathedral around the sound.
That's a great way to put it.
Instead of a dry clap in a small closet, you are hearing the reverberation bounce off the walls of a massive, cavernous space. The drum is no longer just keeping time. it is transformed into a textural environment.
And that transformation is even more drastic when applied to the human voice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The vocal shift is arguably the most recognizable signature of this entire sound.
Oh, for sure.
The production notes describe the vocals as dragging in a way that adds immense weight. And I love this phrasing. It notes that they don't just play through the speakers, they hang in the air.
Which is such a powerful image.
Yep.
Because the human brain is uniquely optimized to process human speech.
Right, we're tuned for it.
Exactly. We are biologically hardwired to extract narrative meaning, emotion, and urgency from vocal formants and pitch fluctuations.
Okay.
So when a rapper or a singer performs at a standard tempo, they are usually driving a narrative forward. The voice is conversational. It has an urgent communicative quality.
They're telling you something right now.
Right. But when you drastically lower the pitch and stretch the time, you distort those vocal formants.
It completely strips away that urgent conversational quality.
Yes. The voice becomes incredibly deep, almost androgynous, and just incredibly lethargic.
So if you're listening, mentally take your favorite upbeat track right now and imagine those vocals just dragging out, hanging in the air. It completely changes the emotional weight of what's being said, doesn't it?
It really does. It creates what we call a psychoacoustic detachment.
A psychoacoustic detachment.
Yeah, because the vowels are elongated. A syllable that previously took a fraction of a second now stretches across a whole measure. The brain stops processing the vocal primarily as speech.
Wait, so what does it process it as?
It starts processing it as an instrument. The vocal functions more like a thick, sustained synthesizer pad.
Oh.
When we say it hangs in the air, we are talking about the sustain and release phases of the vocal envelope being artificially extended. The breath of the vocalist, the subtle rasp of their vocal cords, the microscopic imperfections in their delivery, all of these microtextures are magnified.
It's like switching from water to syrup.
How do you mean?
Well, if you pour a glass of water, it splashes, it scatters, and it's gone instantly, right?
Right.
But if you pour thick molasses, it catches the light. It folds over itself in slow motion. It hangs suspended from the lip of the jar before it finally drops.
That is a perfect visualization.
The vocal stops being someone talking at you, rushing to tell you a story, and becomes this dense atmospheric fog that is just existing around you.
And that density is a recurring theme here, because the melodies undergo a similar process of thickening.
Right. The notes suggest that melodies sit much deeper in the track once the tempo drops.
Which makes sense intuitively, but mechanically we have to ask why a melody feels thicker just because it's slower and lower.
Yeah, why does it actually feel that way?
It comes down to how frequencies occupy the mixing spectrum.
Okay, break that down for us.
In a standard pop or hip-hop mix, you have a very structured hierarchy. The sub-bass and kick drum hold down the low end, from roughly 20 to 100 hertz.
Got it.
The snare and the vocals sit in the mid-range, and the bright melodies like high synthesizers, bells, string clucks are usually pushed up into the high frequencies, say 2,000 to 10,000 hertz.
Right, so they don't clash.
Exactly. They sit on top of the mix like a layer of bright icing. They are thin, piercing, and fast.
But when you pull that analog pitch fader down,
You collapse the ceiling. Those bright, airy frequencies at 10,000 hertz get pitched down into the mid-range. They lose their piercing sharpness.
Oh, I see.
And because lower frequencies have longer, wider waveforms, the physical shape of the synthesizer sound actually widens.
So a melody that used to be a thin, sharp wire just skimming the surface of the track
Yes.
is transformed to a thick, heavy steel cable.
Exactly. And because it's now occupying the mid-range, alongside the vocals and the snare, it has to fight for space. It sinks down into the bedrock of the track. It becomes foundational rather than ornamental.
That actually brings up a huge potential problem, though.
What's up?
If you drop the pitch of a fully mastered track and you force all these bright, high-frequency melodies down into the mid-range, and you stretch out the bass so it lingers longer and you drag the vocals out, doesn't the track just turn into absolute sonic mud?
It's a very logical concern.
I mean, how do you prevent it from becoming a claustrophobic, overlapping mess where nothing is distinct anymore?
What's fascinating here is that this paradox highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of what space means in audio production.
Okay.
It forces us to examine the architecture of the mix itself. The source material argues that slowing the track down actually creates real space.
But it defines space very specifically in the text. Not just as silence or just the rest between notes. It defines it as the room required for an element to fully exist without being rushed out of the way.
Yes, Because Western music theory often trains us to think of space purely as rests.
Right, a quarter rest to half rest.
Moments when nobody plays. It views space as a void. But in the realm of audio engineering, space is volumetric.
Volumetric, so like three-dimensional.
Exactly. It is the three-dimensional capacity of a mix. Modern commercial music suffers heavily from what engineers call the loudness wars.
Oh, yeah. The race to make every song as loud as physically possible for radio and streaming.
Precisely. To achieve that maximum loudness, mastering engineers use heavy compression and brick wall limiters. They squash the dynamic range so the quietest parts are almost as loud as the loudest parts.
Which is exhausting to listen to.
It really is. And in that environment, a producer is constantly playing a frantic game of Tetris. If the kick drum hits, the bass line has to be immediately ducked out of the way so they don't clash.
That's a technique called side chaining, right?
Exactly, sidechain compression. And if the vocal comes in, the synthesizers have to be carved out. Sounds are brutally truncated.
Fast music rushes elements out of the way to make room for the next one.
Exactly. They are rushed onto the stage, forced to say their line, and violently yanked off stage to make room for the next element.
It's audio claustrophobia. The elements don't get to fully exist, they just get these brief cameos.
But when you radically slow the tempo, you alter the geometry of the mix.
Okay, geometry.
Yeah. You are widening the x-axis, the timeline. Even though the elements are thicker and heavier on the y-axis, the frequency spectrum, the expanded timeline prevents them from colliding in the same way.
Oh, I see.
The kick drum has the physical time to strike, resonate, and decay completely before the snare drum arrives.
So if we give every sound room to fully exist, the track doesn't actually fall apart or become muddy.
Yeah.
Because the deliberate heaviness itself creates a structure.
Exactly.
The lingering bass and the echoing drums act as a continuous sonic bridge.
Continuous sonic bridge is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Let's look at a heavy bass drop as an example.
Okay, let's do it.
In a frantic 120 BPM club track, the sub bass hits, and literally milliseconds later, a chaotic 16th note hi-hat pattern is layered frantically over it, right alongside a vocal chant.
Just piling it all on.
Right. The bass is treated merely as a trampoline to launch the listener into the next hyperactive segment of the arrangement. The bass is suffocated.
It never gets to breathe.
Never.
But in this slowed down environment, this DJ screw paradigm, the DJ lets the bass hit, and then they simply let it ring out.
Just let it go.
The bass note extends. It fills the bottom of the spectrum. You actually feel the vibration of that low frequency dissipating slowly into the real space.
And the decay of the instrument fills the void. It's not empty silence, but it's not cluttered either. It's a graceful exit.
Right. And only once that bass has fully completed its life cycle does the thick, dragged melody slowly rise to take its place.
You are respecting the lifespan of the sound. You are allowing the audio wave to behave like a physical object rolling across a massive room, rather than just data being rapidly processed on a digital grid. And when you respect the lifespan of the sound, you inevitably alter the psychological state of the person listening to it.
Which is really where this transitions from a technical audio exercise into a profound psychological experience.
Absolutely.
Because if you stretch the physical anatomy of the sound and you completely restructure the space it occupies, you are effectively hacking the listener's nervous system.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the foundational argument in our production notes is that this sound is fundamentally not about movement.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
I mean, given that this technique was born out of hip-hop, a genre deeply rooted in groove and head nodding and physical movement, dance music, hip-hop, pop, they're historically defined by their ability to compel the body to move.
They are designed for propulsion. They are engineered to push the listener forward. But let's look at the biology of that.
Okay, biology.
The average resting human heart rate is somewhere between 60 and 80 beats per minute. When you listen to a high-energy track at 120 or 130 BPM, your brain engages in a process called entrainment.
Entrainment.
Yes. Your internal rhythms unconsciously attempt to sync with the external stimuli.
So your body tries to match the fast beat.
Exactly. Fast music literally elevates your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, and it triggers a mild sympathetic nervous system response. It prepares your body for action.
It creates a state of perpetual anticipation. You are always leaning forward, mentally bracing for the snare drop, waiting for the massive chorus, anticipating the next rhythmic shift.
Yay.
It's an anxiety of anticipation. It might be a pleasurable, euphoric anxiety like being on a roller coaster, but you are constantly living half a step in the future, waiting for the song to do something to you.
That is the psychology of velocity. But what happens when the tempo drops to 60 BPM?
It matches your resting heart rate.
It aligns perfectly with it, or even dips below it. It triggers the parasympathetic nervous system.
Oh, wow. So it actually calms you down physically.
Exactly. The brain stops bracing for impact.
Because the gap between the beats is so vast, your brain eventually just gives up trying to predict when the next snare is going to hit.
Yeah.
You can't successfully anticipate the rhythm, so you just surrender to it.
Surrender is the exact mechanism at play here. The notes describe this as trading movement for immersion. It's about letting the music surround you instead of pushing you forward.
Think about the difference between riding a bullet train and floating in a sensory deprivation tank.
Okay, let's hear it.
On the bullet train, you are strapped in, hurtling toward a destination. The scenery outside the window is just a blur. You aren't really in the environment, you are just passing through it.
Right.
Your entire experience is defined by the forward momentum. But when you step into a warm sensory deprivation pool, you have absolutely zero forward momentum.
Because you're just floating.
Exactly. You aren't trying to swim to the other side of the tank. You are completely enveloped by the water. The destination ceases to matter entirely. The present moment, the feeling of the water against your skin, the sounds of your own breathing, that becomes the entire universe.
That is the essence of immersion. And the text provides a remarkably poignant justification for this. It says, it's not slow for the sake of being slow. It's slow so you can feel everything.
So you can feel everything. That's powerful.
It really is.
When you remove the anxiety of anticipating the next beat, you are forced into a state of deep auditory mindfulness.
Right, because you aren't rushing ahead anymore.
Exactly. You stop looking forward to the next bar, and you finally have the cognitive bandwidth to examine the current moment. You can feel the physical vibration of that lingering bass line.
You can hear the microscopic texture of the vocal cords vibrating.
It transforms from a listening experience into a sonic meditation.
But orchestrating that sonic meditation requires immense discipline. Which brings us to the actual application of these concepts behind the turntables.
Right, the actual DJing part.
Yes. Understanding the physics and the psychology is one thing, but executing a mix that sustains this fragile, immersive environment that requires a complete rewiring of traditional DJ instincts.
The notes offer what basically amounts to a strict code of conduct for the DJ. The directive is very clear. It says, you do not rush transitions. You do not force energy.
Forcing energy is the cardinal sin in this paradigm,
Yeah.
Yet it is the default reflex for almost every DJ on the planet.
Exactly. Anyone who has ever stood behind a pair of decks knows that feeling.
Right.
You are constantly reading the room. If you sense the crowd's attention drifting or the physical energy on the floor dipping, the overwhelming instinct is to fix it.
You want to bring the hype back.
Yeah. You reach for a faster track, you trigger a massive high-pass filter buildup, you execute a sharp rapid-fire cut on the crossfader to inject a sudden burst of adrenaline into the room. You are trained to be a manipulator of hype.
The traditional DJ acts as a puppeteer, constantly yanking the strings to keep the crowd elevated. But that approach relies entirely on the anxiety of anticipation we just discussed. If you are operating at 65 BPM and you suddenly slam in a rapid, aggressive transition, or you try to artificially hype up the track with fast scratching or sudden drops, you violently shatter the real space you've spent the last 10 minutes building.
You rip the listener out of the sensory deprivation pool and throw them back onto the bullet train.
Exactly. The spell is broken.
It requires a massive suspension of ego from the DJ.
Total ego death. You have to relinquish control over the crowd's kinetic energy and trust the gravity of the music itself. You have to let the lethargic pace dictate the flow rather than trying to force the pace to match your own impatience.
And the notes provide a really beautiful framework for how to handle these transitions without breaking the spell.
Yeah.
They tell the DJ to let records melt into each other.
The concept of melting is vastly different from cutting or dropping. A traditional DJ mix often relies on sharp boundaries.
Right, like a hard cut.
Yeah. Track A is playing, the crossfader snaps over, and instantly track B begins. It's a collision. It has hard, defined edges.
But melting implies a dissolution of boundaries entirely. If you put an ice cube in a glass of warm water, there isn't a single definitive moment where the ice ceases to be ice and becomes water.
That's a great way to think about it.
The solid structure slowly, gradually loses its form, blending on a molecular level until the two distinct elements are completely indistinguishable.
Mechanically, achieving an auditory melt requires deep technical finesse with the mixer's EQ section. Remember, we are dealing with newly heavy, widened frequencies here.
Right, the thick cables instead of thin wires.
Exactly. If you just shove two 65 BPM tracks together at full volume, their massive lingering bass lines will clash violently, causing horrible distortion.
So how does a DJ actually execute a melt without creating mud?
It's a process of sonic displacement.
Sonic displacement.
Okay. The DJ identifies a massive pocket of real space in the outgoing track. While the thick melody of track A is slowly playing out, the DJ gradually sneaks in the atmospheric, dragging vocal of track B. And they carve out the mid-range frequencies on the mixer so they don't fight. They might hold this overlap for 2 full minutes.
Wow, 2 minutes.
Yes, it's not a 10-second transition. It is an excruciatingly slow, deliberate blend. They wait for the bass line of track A to naturally decay, and right as it fades into the void, they gently roll in the heavy sub-bass of track B to replace it.
The elements intertwine. The echoing drums of the first track basically become the foundational rhythm for the thick melody of the second track.
Precisely. The crossfade is so slow, and the frequencies are swapped so delicately that the listener never experiences a sudden jolt.
The immersion is never broken.
Right. The listener doesn't even realize they've been transported into an entirely new song until they are already fully enveloped by it. The boundary between the tracks simply melts away.
This meticulous prioritization of the melt, of protecting the immersive space over generating cheap hype, it really forces us to reevaluate DJ Screw's legacy.
It does.
It bridges the gap between this hyper-specific, localized 1990s hip-hop technique and the massive global landscape of modern music consumption.
This raises an important question, Try. How did a technique centered around slowing down tempo become the blueprint for modern listening habits?
Yeah, that's wild to think about.
Because the production notes make a bold but entirely accurate assertion. They claim that while we constantly talk about vibes, mood, and atmosphere today, DJ Screw was already there decades ago.
He really was.
He was building entire listening experiences around feeling rather than speed, long before the technology caught up.
Think about the architecture of how we consume audio right now. We rarely categorize our daily listening strictly by traditional genres anymore.
Not at all.
You don't necessarily wake up and say, I want to listen to a rock album. You go to a streaming platform and search for a mood.
Right, like a playlist.
Yeah, you look for playlists titled Deep Focus or Late Night Drive, Chill Steady Beats, Ethereal Vibes. We actively seek out music that acts as environmental architecture. We want music we can exist inside of rather than music we have to actively decode or dance to.
We are seeking that parasympathetic nervous system response. Modern subgenres like lo-fi hip-hop, ambient trap, and vaporwave, which is entirely built on slowing down 1980s pop music, by the way, are all descendants of this philosophy.
Totally.
They all prioritize texture over tempo. They all rely on heavy, widened frequencies and the artificial creation of deep acoustic space. When the mainstream music industry of the late 90s and early 2000s was obsessed with pushing tempos higher, maximizing radio compression, and creating frantic, hyperkinetic club hits, DJ Screw pulled the pitch fader in the exact opposite direction.
He recognized a fundamental underlying human desire to escape the relentless forward propulsion of modern life. He understood that sometimes people just want to sit in the pocket, to feel the literal weight of a sound wave. He engineered a holistic emotional environment, a sonic sanctuary, using nothing but a pair of turntables and a profound understanding of acoustic physics.
It stands as a masterclass in recontextualization. He proved that you don't necessarily need to invent new instruments or synthesize new sounds to create a revolution.
Right.
You simply have to alter the parameters of time, and you can reveal an entirely new, hidden universe inside the art that already exists.
So what does this all mean for us? What's truly remarkable is that our notes for today, this entire deep dive into the physics of the stretch, the geometry of the real space, and the psychology of immersion, is framed as merely the starting point.
It's just the beginning.
The document concludes with a brilliant little sign-off. It says, that's Tuesday, we in the groove now, tomorrow we talk personality.
That framing is essential. It reminds us not to get lost purely in the technical mechanics. The echoing drums, the distorted vocal formants, the thickened synthesizers. These are ultimately just architectural tools.
Exactly. Dissecting the heavy bass lines and the slow transitions was just about getting us into the groove. It was laying the concrete foundation. It sets the stage for understanding the actual soul, the humanity, the personality of the artists, whose voices and stories are echoing inside that newly constructed cathedral of sound.
Because without the human element, the space is just an empty room. The technique creates the environment, but the personality provides the meaning.
So to synthesize everything we've unpacked today, we've learned that tempo is vastly more than just a speedometer on a track.
Right.
When manipulated in the analog realm, it acts as a gravitational force that adds literal acoustic mass to vocals and drums. We've discovered that real space in a mix isn't the absence of sound.
No, it's volumetric.
It's the volumetric room required for an instrument's full life cycle to exist and decay without being suffocated. We've seen how the DJ must endure ego death, resisting the urge to force energy and instead mastering the delicate art of melting records together.
Yeah, melting, not cutting.
And ultimately, we've realized that aggressively slowing down isn't about losing momentum or falling behind. It is an intentional, highly engineered trade-off, sacrificing kinetic movement to achieve total psychological immersion.
It takes a certain level of auditory patience to fully appreciate this. It requires fighting the urge to skip to the chorus. So thank you for joining us in the pocket today and for taking the time to truly examine the space between the notes.
As we wrap up, I want to bring us right back to that opening image. The high-speed subway train roaring past, a chaotic blur of metal and noise, and that profound, reality-altering shift that occurs when you force the world into a heavy, deliberate slow motion.
Right.
We've certainly explored the magic that happens when you apply that mechanism to an audio file. But what if we took this philosophy beyond the turntable?
Oh, interesting.
If simply dragging down the tempo of a track reveals hidden textures, constructs vast new real spaces, and shifts the entire human experience from feeling aggressively propelled to feeling completely immersed, imagine applying that exact same DJ screw philosophy to the mechanics of your daily life.
Wow.
What would happen if we deliberately pulled the pitch fader down on our daily routines? If we stopped hyper-compressing our schedules and rushing our conversations to get to the next beat, and instead gave every single interaction the real space to fully exist and naturally decay?
I love that.
What hidden, heavy, meaningful details in your own life might you finally have the bandwidth to hear?